This letter, found tucked beneath a rotting floorboard in the ruins of a farmhouse near the village of Ashford, England, dated to the winter of 1315, during the Great Famine that swept across Europe. If you are reading this, then God has seen fit to preserve these words longer than he saw fit to preserve the man who wrote them. My name is Thomas Aldwyne. I am a farmer. I was a farmer. I do not know any more what I am, except hungry and cold and afraid in ways I never thought a grown man could be afraid. I have ploughed these fields since I was old enough to hold a handle. I have buried seed in this earth and watched it rise, green and faithful, every spring of my life. But this year, this cursed, silent year, the earth gave nothing back. Nothing. As if God pressed his hand flat against the soil and said, "Not yet. Not for you. Not this season." I write this by the light of a single tallow candle, the last one we have. My wife Agnes does not know I am writing. She is asleep beside the children, all three of them pressed together like lambs in a pen, sharing what little warmth their small bodies can make between them. I pulled the thatch tighter over the east wall this evening, where the wind had found a gap. It will not hold long. The wind here in winter does not ask permission. It simply enters, the way hunger enters, quietly at first, then all at once. Outside, the world is the color of old ash. It has been that way since August, when the rains came and did not stop. I remember standing in the field on the feast of St. Peter, looking up at a sky so swollen and grey it seemed to press down on the hills like a great stone weight. The wheat was already bending wrong, already the color of something dying. I told myself it would pass. Every farmer tells himself that. We are a people built on the faith that the season turns, that the soil remembers what it is supposed to do. I told Agnes it would pass. I told the children not to worry. I was wrong. And I think some part of me knew it even then. The harvest this year was barely enough to call a harvest. We brought in perhaps a third of what the previous year gave us, and that year had not been generous. What little grain we cut was wet and heavy, and much of it rotted before we could dry it properly. I watched my neighbour Edmund Croft weeping in his field, a man I have never seen cry, not when his father died, not when his first son was born stillborn. He was on his knees in the mud between the ruined rows, and he was weeping without sound, just his shoulders moving, the rain still falling on his back. I did not know what to say to him. I walked past. I am not proud of that. I was too frightened of what I might see in his face because I knew it was the same thing that was in mine. We tried to prepare. We always try to prepare. Agnes dried what mushrooms she could find, and I salted what little remained from the pig we slaughtered in October, earlier than usual, because there was no grain left to fatten him on. The root vegetables came up small and bitter. The apple trees gave almost nothing. Even the hedgerows, which in ordinary years are thick with berries in autumn, were spare and grey. It was as if the land itself had turned inward, had decided to keep whatever it had left for itself. I applied to Lord Harwick's steward in September, asking if the autumn tithe might be reduced given the state of the harvest. The steward, a thin young man with ink-stained fingers who has never, I suspect, dug anything out of the ground in his life, looked at me with an expression that I recognized, though I had never seen it directed at me before. It was the look of a man calculating what you are worth. He told me the tithe stood. He told me the Lord had his own obligations. He told me God sends hardship to test the faithful. I walked home 7 miles in the rain and said nothing to Agnes about what the steward had said. I told her we would manage. I have told her that many times since. I am not sure she believes me anymore, though she is too kind to say so. By November, the village had begun to change in ways that are difficult to describe, but impossible to ignore. People who once stopped to talk at the well now move quickly, eyes down, as if conversation itself costs something they cannot spare. Old widow Marjorie, who lives at the edge of the village near the mill, was found 3 weeks ago sitting in her doorway in the frost, her hands folded in her lap, already gone. No one had checked on her for 4 days. I think about that. I think about it more than I should. The miller's youngest boy was caught stealing grain from the church storehouse. He is 8 years old. Father Edmund wept when he had to report it to the reeve. The boy was given 10 lashes. I watched it happen and felt something harden in my chest that I do not think will ever fully soften again. He did not cry during the lashing. I think that was the most frightening thing of all, that an 8-year-old boy could stand and receive 10 lashes without crying, because he had already learned that crying costs energy, and energy is something none of us have to waste. My eldest, William, is 12. He understands now, in the way children understand things they are not supposed to have to understand. I see him watching me at meals, watching to see how much I eat, and I see him eat less so that his brother and sister might have more. I have tried to stop him. He simply waits until I am not watching. I did not raise him to be hungry. I raised him to be strong and to inherit something worth inheriting. I do not know anymore what I will leave him. The candle is burning low. I should stop and sleep. But there is something in me tonight that cannot be still. Some restlessness, some need to put words to things before the words are lost, before I am too tired or too weak or too broken to remember what it felt like to be a man who believed the spring would come. So I write, in the dark, in the cold, while my family sleeps. And I keep writing because somewhere beneath all of this, beneath the fear and the hunger and the shame of a man who cannot feed his own children, I still believe that someone someday will want to know that we were here, that we endured, that we tried, that a man named Thomas Aldwyne once loved this land with everything he had, and that it was not enough. 7:21 p.m. The candle I burned that first night is gone now. I write this by the light of the fire, what little of it remains. We are burning the old fence posts, the ones I spent 3 summers cutting and setting along the eastern field. I built that fence to keep the sheep in. There are no sheep anymore. We ate the last one in December. I remember the morning Agnes and I made that decision. We stood in the cold outside the pen, looking at the animal, and neither of us spoke for a long time. She was a good ewe, that last one. We had called her nothing. Farmers learn not to name the ones they will eventually eat, but the children had called her something anyway, the way children always do. They had called her Bess. Agnes took the children inside before I did what had to be done. I stood there afterward in the snow with my hands red and my breath coming out in clouds, and I felt nothing. That frightened me more than the hunger. A man should feel something. Even necessity should cost him something inside. But I felt nothing at all, only a dull, flat relief that we would eat for a few more days. That was 6 weeks ago. The meat is long gone. January has been the cruelest month I have ever lived through, and I have lived through winters that killed strong men. But this is different. In ordinary hard winters, there is still the knowledge that the stores will hold, that the cold is temporary, that the calendar is moving even when the world feels frozen. This winter, there is no such knowledge. There is only the question of tomorrow, and then the question of the day after that, asked again and again until the questions stop making sense. The village has grown quiet in a way that I cannot properly explain to someone who has not heard it. It is not the quiet of peace, it is the quiet of exhaustion, of people conserving everything, even breath, even sound. The children do not play outside anymore, not only because of the cold, but because play requires something in the belly, some small surplus of energy, and there is no surplus of anything here. I watch young ones sitting in doorways with large eyes and still hands, and they look like very old people. That same stillness, that same inward gaze, as if they have already begun the long journey away from the world. My daughter Elspeth is 7 years old. She asked me last week why God was angry with us. I told her God was not angry. I told her this was a test, the way Father Edmund says, the way all men of the church say when they have no better answer. She looked at me with those grey eyes of hers, her mother's eyes, and she said very quietly, "But what did we do wrong?" I had no answer for her. I have turned that question over every night since. What did we do wrong? I am not a sinful man, or I have not tried to be. I have paid my tithes when I had anything to pay. I have attended Mass. I have tried to be a fair neighbour, a patient father, a faithful husband. I have never taken more from this land than I needed, never burned more than the wasteland the Lord permitted, never poached, never stolen, never raised my hand against a man who did not raise his first. And yet, here we are. There are those in the village who say the Jews have poisoned the wells, or that witches have cursed the harvests, or that the sins of the nobility have brought God's wrath down upon the common people as punishment for their master's pride. Men believe strange things when they are frightened and hungry. I have heard uglier talk than that, talk I will not write down, because I do not want those words to outlast the men who spoke them in desperation. Fear does terrible things to the way a man reasons. I have felt it myself, that searching, that need to find a cause that makes sense of senseless suffering, someone to blame, something to point at and say, there, that is why. But I am a farmer. I know the soil. I know the sky. I know what happens when rain falls without stopping for 3 months on ground already saturated, when the temperature drops before the grain can dry, when the sun simply refuses to come. I do not think this is a curse. I think this is the world, doing what the world sometimes does, indifferent to our prayers and our goodness and our need. That is either a comforting thought or the most terrifying one I have ever had. I have not decided which. In February, 3 men from the village went to seek work in the city. They said Winchester, or maybe London, that they had heard there was work there, that the towns were buying labour. I do not know if that is true or rumour. Hunger makes men into carriers of hope, the way ships carry cargo, willing to bear anything across any distance if it means arriving somewhere better. They left on a grey morning with small bundles and thin faces, and the village watched them go with a mixture of envy and dread. Envy because they were moving, doing something, refusing to simply wait. Dread because everyone knew what the roads were like in winter during a famine, full of other desperate men, full of sickness, full of the particular violence that emerges when enough starving people occupy the same space. We have heard nothing from them since. It has been 5 weeks. I thought about going myself. I will not pretend the thought has not visited me, because it has, many times, in the small hours of the night, when the hunger is sharpest and the walls of this house feel like the walls of a trap. I could go to the city. I could find work. I could send money back. Other men have done it. But every time I think it through to its end, I see Agnes alone here with 3 children, in this cold, with what little remains of our stores, and I cannot finish the thought. I cannot make the numbers work in a way that ends with me leaving and everyone surviving. I am more useful here than in Winchester. I am more useful as a pair of hands and a body between my family and the cold than I am as a rumour of wages that may never arrive. So I stay. I split the fence posts. I mend the walls. I check the stores each morning with the same ritual, lifting the lids, measuring with my eyes, calculating, that has become a kind of dark prayer. Not, please God, let there be more, but simply, let me see clearly what there is, so I do not lie to myself about how long it will last. It will not last much longer. I know that now. I have known it for some time, but there is a distance between knowing a thing and allowing yourself to speak it, even in writing, even alone. The stores will be gone within a month, perhaps less if the cold continues and the body demands more to stay warm. After that, I do not know. There is bark, I suppose. There is leather. I have heard men speak of boiling the leather from old boots into something resembling soup, something that silences the stomach without truly feeding it. I have heard worse things than that spoken around fires this winter, in the matter-of-fact voices of men who have already made their peace with the unthinkable. I have not made that peace yet. Agnes found me writing this evening. She stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at me, and I looked at her, and something passed between us that did not need words. That particular language that long marriages develop, the one spoken entirely in glances and silences, and the small adjustments of expression that mean everything. She did not ask what I was writing. She came and sat beside me and put her head against my shoulder, and we sat that way for a long time, watching the fire eat the last of the fence posts. She still smells like herself. Beneath the cold and the wood smoke and the particular smell of want, she still smells like Agnes, like the woman I married in the church at Ashford 14 years ago, when I was 22 and the world was large and possible. I closed my eyes and held on to that. The children are sleeping, the fire is going down. I will write again when I can, if I can. The fire went out 3 nights ago, and I have not been able to get it back properly. The wood is wet. Everything is wet. The thatch leaks in 2 places now, and I have stuffed rags into the gaps, but the cold comes through anyway. The way cold always finds its way, not through the holes you can see, but through the ones you cannot. I woke yesterday morning with frost on the inside of the wall beside my head, a thin white crust of it along the stone, and I lay there looking at it for a long time before I got up. There was a moment, just a moment, where the idea of simply not getting up presented itself to me with a terrible gentleness. Not as despair, as rest, as the simple, quiet logic of a body that has been asked to do too much for too long. I got up. I got up because William was already awake and watching me, the way he always watches me now, measuring, and I could not let him see his father choose to stay down. I got up because Elspeth made a sound in her sleep, a small sound, almost a word, and I needed to know she was warm enough. I got up because Agnes had already risen before me, as she always does, and I could hear her moving in the cold on the other side of the room, doing what she does every morning, checking, tending, holding the pieces of this life together with her bare hands. I got up because a man who stays down is already something less than a man, and I am not ready to be that yet. But I want to be honest here, in these pages, in a way that I cannot be honest with my family. I am weakening, not in will. The will is still there, stubborn and stupid as it has always been, but in body. I can feel it in the way my legs work in the morning, slow and reluctant, requiring a conversation with my own muscles before they agree to move. I can feel it in the way my hands shake sometimes when I lift things. I can feel it in the way the cold has stopped feeling like cold and started feeling like something deeper, something that lives inside the bones rather than on the skin. I gave my portion to the children again last night. Agnes saw me do it and said nothing, but her jaw tightened in that way it does when she is too tired to argue and too frightened to be angry. I think she has been doing the same thing herself, giving her share to the little ones, and we have not spoken of it directly because speaking of it would make it into something we would have to find a solution to. And there is no solution. There is only tomorrow. And then the day after that. The village lost 2 more people this week. Old Harlan, the blacksmith's father, who had been ill since November with a cough that never left him, and little Anne Croft, Edmund's youngest, 4 years old, with hair the colour of autumn straw. She had been failing for some time. Edmund came to our door to tell us, and stood on the step with his hat in his hands, a man so emptied out by grief and hunger that he barely seemed to inhabit his own body anymore. Agnes wept. I put my hand on Edmund's shoulder. He looked at me with eyes like 2 stones at the bottom of a dry well. He said, "She did not suffer at the end." I do not know if that was true, or if it was simply the thing a father must say to keep himself standing upright. Perhaps it does not matter. Perhaps the mercy is in the saying of it, regardless. I have been thinking about my own father these past days. He died when I was 19, a fever, quick and sharp the way fevers sometimes are, there and then gone. He was a farmer on this same land, and his father before him, and his father before that. This same soil, these same fields, this same low hill with the oak at the top that I have looked at every morning of my life, and that I am looking at now through the gap in the wall, bare and black against a white sky. My father used to say, "The land remembers every man who ever worked it." He said it with a kind of reverence, the way he said things in church, as if the soil were itself a kind of scripture. I believed him then. I want to believe him now. But the land does not look like it remembers anything this year. It looks like it has forgotten everything. The seed, the labour, the generations of men who broke themselves against it in love and faith and necessity. It looks like it simply does not know us anymore. Or perhaps we are the ones who have forgotten something. Perhaps there is a knowledge that older generations had, some understanding of seasons and hunger and endurance that we have lost in the good years, the way you forget how to be cold when you have been warm for long enough. Perhaps suffering is itself a kind of instruction, and I am supposed to be learning something here that I am not yet wise enough to see. I think about that sometimes. In the long hours of the night when sleep will not come, and the cold is very present, and the sounds of my children breathing are the most precious sounds in the world, I try to find the meaning in it, the lesson, the shape that all of this will make when it is over, when I can look back at it from a distance and say, there, that is what it was for. But I am too close to it. I am inside it, and from inside it has no shape. It is only cold and hunger, and the faces of people I love, thinner every week, and the question that will not leave me alone, no matter how many other thoughts I surround it with. How much longer? There was a peddler who passed through 3 days ago, the first outsider we had seen in over a month. He was a skeleton of a man on a skeleton of a horse, and he had almost nothing to sell. A few small tools, some thread, nothing we could eat. But he brought news, the way peddlers do, carrying information from village to village like seeds carried on the wind. He said the famine was everywhere, not just here, not just Ashford, not just Hampshire or the south, everywhere. He had come from the north, and before that from the Midlands, and he said the same story was written on every face he had passed. The same sunken eyes, the same quiet, the same snow over empty fields. He said he had seen people on the roads, not travellers, not men seeking work, people who had simply left, who had walked away from their farms and their villages and their lives and were moving somewhere, anywhere, with no clear destination except away from where the hunger was, as if hunger were a place you could leave rather than a condition that follows you. He said the roads between towns were lined with them in places, whole families moving in silence through the snow, and that some of them were already beyond help and did not know it yet. I gave him a small piece of dried meat, the last of what I had kept hidden even from Agnes, a secret store I had made against the worst possibility. I do not know why I gave it to a stranger, perhaps because he had come from outside this shrinking world and reminded me that the world was still large, still moving, still full of people trying to survive. Perhaps because generosity is the last thing that makes you feel human when everything else has been stripped away, and I needed to feel human that afternoon more than I needed the meat. He thanked me with tears in his eyes. He rode on. I stood at the edge of the field and watched him go until he disappeared over the hill, and then I stood there a while longer, looking at the road, empty again, the snow already covering his horse's tracks, as if he had never passed at all. Agnes found me standing there. She took my hand without saying anything. Her fingers were very cold. I held them and tried to give her some warmth, and I do not know if I had any left to give, but I tried. We stood there together, the two of us, looking at the empty road in the white silence of a world that seemed to have forgotten the colour green. I am writing this on what I believe is the first day of March, though I have lost count, and the days have blurred together in the way they do when each one is the same as the one before it. The stores are nearly gone. I have found some grain I missed in the corner of the barn beneath an old sack, enough perhaps for a few more days of thin porridge if we are careful. I have told no one yet. I will tell Agnes tonight. I am going to try to reach the monastery at Wolvesey. It is 12 miles east, and I have heard, rumour again, always rumour, the currency of desperate men, that the brothers there have been distributing what they can to those who come. 12 miles in this cold, in this body, on this stomach, is not what 12 miles used to be. But I do not see another path forward, and a man who can still walk must walk. I will leave at first light if the weather allows. William asked me tonight where I was going. I told him to help his mother. I told him he was the man of the house while I was away. He stood up straighter when I said it, and something moved across his face that was half pride and half a grief too old for a 12-year-old boy to carry. I pulled him against me and held him for a long moment. He let me, which surprised me. He is at the age where boys resist such things, but he held on, and I felt his ribs beneath my hands, and I held him tighter, and I said nothing because there was nothing to say that would have been enough. Elspeth and the little one are asleep. Agnes is sitting across from me, mending a shirt by the last light of the fire, her head bent, her hands moving in that steady, patient way she has always had, that deep, unshakable steadiness that has been the fixed point of my life for 14 years, the thing I have always turned toward when the world was difficult. I am looking at her now, and I am trying to hold this image still inside me, the way you hold a candle against the wind, carefully, with both hands, protecting the flame. I will be back before the week is out. I will bring something home. I will find a way, the way I have always found a way, the way men like me have always found a way, because there is no other choice, and because the people asleep in this house are worth every frozen step of 12 miles, and 12 miles more beyond that, if that is what it takes. I have to believe that. I have to. The fire is nearly gone, and my hand is shaking too much to write clearly, and the cold is very close now, just outside the walls, patient as it has always been, waiting. I am folding this letter and leaving it here beneath the board where I keep what little is left of value in this house, so that if something happens, so that if the road is harder than I expect, someone will know that Thomas Aldwyne was here, that he loved his family beyond the measure of any words he knew, that he walked out into the white and the cold, not because he was brave, but because love does not give a man the option of standing still. Agnes, if you find this before I return, and I pray to God you do not need to read it at all, I want you to know that the 14 years have been enough, more than enough. They have been everything. I am going now. The door is very cold beneath my hand, and outside, the road stretches east into a darkness so complete I cannot see where the snow ends and the sky begins.